So the R6 Mark II is rumored to be announced in early November, and it makes me want to reflect on kind of the path that the R5 and the R6 has been going on over the past couple of years, with the two main mirrorless photo hybrid cameras being the R5 series and the R6 series. Now, the most interesting thing is that the R6 has had quite an interesting path when compared to the R5 series. Now, if you're new to this channel, definitely consider subscribing. I talk about cameras, mirrorless cameras, and DSLRs specifically for video. So if you're into photos, I touch on that, but I mostly focus on the video functions. Now, the R5, and this is the original R5, was released in July 30th, 2020, as well as the R6. So these pretty much have the similar release dates. The R5 was kind of like the bigger brother to the R6. R5 was, the follow-up to the 5D series, and the R6 was considered the follow-up to the 6D series, although that's not officially something that Canon would say. It is what the mass population has considered to be the way that they've been going. Now, the R5, when it came out, the video features specifically is that it did 8K RAW recording internally, 4K oversampled, up to 120 frames per second, though the 120 and the 60 frames per second is not oversampled from the 8K sensor, but it's still quite an achievement on this camera. I consider it still an amazing camera with firmware updates that have, of course, really unleashed the power of this camera. For example, if I go up to the movie recording features of this camera can do 8K up to 30 frames per second. It can do RAW internally, a compressed RAW. You've got all-eye IPB, different compression modes. And the fact that it has all of these video features in an easy to use format, and that fact that when you're recording RAW and up to 30 frames per second, at the point after the firmware updates, you can basically record with, of course, a 30-minute time limit, RAW to your heart's content internally. What made the R5 series separate, besides the fact that its recording features are what they are, is the fact that they use CFexpress cards for the R5. Granted, this camera with these many features did have a hefty price tag. So this camera was costing you well over $3,000, in the higher $3,000 mark, not 30,000. It was costing you like $3,800 and whatnot. So a cheaper alternative was the R6 at the time. So the R6 is a different body. Now the R5, when it came out, it has a screen on the top where you can see your settings. It has a couple of different features. On the top, you can switch video mode in a strenuous way, but in the R6, when it came out, its video mode was just one form in the dial, which was a lot quicker to say. I could switch from video to photos, although that was a couple of more spins in the dial. You can still get it done pretty quickly and go right from photos and then switch back to video. And now I'm in video mode here, which is cool. Had the on-off switch, just like the R5, but of course no screen to save money. But like I said, another thing that they did was SD card slots. So you have two SD card slots here rather than your CFexpress Type B card slots. So that in itself was a cost savings, but a lot of people preferred SD card slots. And a lot of people preferred the features of the R6 because the R6 can do better in low light, because one would say that its lower megapixel count. Now this was a 24 megapixel, actually the original release was a 20 megapixel camera versus the R5 being a 45 megapixel camera. That was a little bit difficult when it came to low light. Not that bad. I can say that the R5 still did pretty good. but the R6 was better. It can do better in low light, and it had SD card slots, which made people want to adopt it more for photos. However, for video, where video is very data heavy, here's the problem. I don't know if you can see it from here, but you have a 25-minute time limit on 4K 60 frames per second. Now, if I switch out of that and I go to 4K at 24 frames per second, now it's reached to the 30-minute time limit that Canon cameras at the time were doing a lot. Now, this, although cool, would still have a problem of overheating. Now, the R5 had overheating as well, but with firmware updates, basically overheating was no longer a problem, especially after firmware 1.6. However, the R6 never really got that firmware update that would let it record 4K. Now, the R5 has a mode, especially which was important before the days that it would fix the overheating issue, where if you recorded 4K internally on the R5, you wouldn't have an overheating problem. The only time where it would really get to a problem with overheating is if you did 4K HQ mode, which would oversample from the 8K sensor, and then you'd record 4K internally oversampled, and then that had its own time limits. And that was at least an option that you had before it fixed the problem completely, and you should always record 4K oversampled after they fix that problem. However, the R6 itself, the 4K in the camera is always oversampled. It had no way of doing a line skip mode because it wasn't the perfectly double resolution that a 4K video would be, so that it could just skip every other line. This was a 6K sensor, and a 6K sensor, to do that line skipping wouldn't work. So they just oversampled the 4K. Now the 1080p worked great and it wouldn't overheat, but the 4K would. And unfortunately, that was something that firmware updates never fixed. So how did Canon fix it? They came out with the R6 Mark II only a couple of years after the R6 came out, and the R5 was still reigning strong. R6 Mark II introduced the ability of recording without that overheating issue. R6 Mark II also did a 24 megapixel sensor rather than the 20 megapixel sensor, so it did have its advantages. You still had SD card slots on the side, but that was okay because the video files were workable. Now, you had the 4K resolution internally, but you also had the ability on the R6 Mark II to output out of the HDMI. So I'll show you here. You can output out of the HDMI slot full 6K ProRes RAW. That was a feature that a lot of people appreciated. I don't like because ProRes RAW didn't work for me at the time, and the files were too big, and it didn't work with DaVinci Resolve, and Premiere's work with Apple ProRes RAW to this day is still limited. But it still had a micro HDMI slot, so that was an issue for me. But it just, I believe the main purpose of coming out with a release so early was to get rid of that overheating issue that caused so many problems. Now let's fast forward. Here we are. R6 Mark III is rumored. R6 Mark III has a lot of exciting features, and let me tell you what is the most interesting things about it and why you should pick it up. Now, R6 Mark III will be its affordable alternative when compared to the R5 Mark II, which is what I'm recording on right now. The R6 Mark III, I haven't seen anywhere that's confirming that it's going to have dual SD card slots, but I do believe that dual SD card slots is the way to go because, again, CFexpress card slots are awesome, but CFexpress card slots and those cards, though coming down in price, are still not what most people, especially in the R6 line of cameras, have. But now what you're going to get in the R6 Mark III that you don't get in the R5 Mark II And why it's an interesting buy is that it's going to have open gate recording. Now, that's the ability to record the whole sensor. Now, and I'll show you an example of this. Now, you can see that it's paying attention to like what I have it pointed on right now. Now, without moving the camera, I'm going to switch it to photo mode. Now in photo mode, you can see that there's a lot more in frame because now it's showing you what's the entire sensor is seeing. Now, if I can take this mode and I can say, okay, now that I've got this, can I press record? On these older cameras, no, you can't. But on the R6 Mark III, you will be able to record 7K video of the whole sensor, 3x2, and then use it. Now, Open Gate, as many people know, is the format when a camera company allows you to see the whole sensor rather than cropping in for video, which is great for things like anamorphic lenses, and it's great for like social media when you want to record more vertical space as well as horizontal space in your videos. So that's great. And the fact that it can do it in 7K is amazing. But you're also going to have the ability to record raw video in DCI and in OpenGate. So you will get that ability to record OpenGate raw internally. But what does that mean for the SD card slots? Again, I haven't seen anything that says that you're going to be able to use SD card slots to record 7K raw. So I would bet that if it's going to do that, they're probably going to make it one SD card slot and one CFexpress card slot, which I'm not too excited about, but it's something that will not alienate the old shooters who love the R6 series because they'll still have one SD card slot to use. It's going to have 4K recording, of course, up to 60 frames per second, I would imagine, right? But it's going to have a lot of bells and whistles too. But one of the features that it doesn't have, or is not rumored to have, which is quite unfortunate, and if they did do it, I would go nuts, is the fact that if you're recording audio, whether through an external microphone or throughout the ports here on the camera itself, it would be nice if this camera could record 32-bit audio. Basically, we've got raw video. Why not give us quote-unquote raw audio and let us record that incredible dynamic range in the audio that would allow the camera to, of course, be a next step. Perhaps they're saving that for a future camera, but that is something that, unfortunately, it's not rumored yet that it would have 32-bit audio. From what I've heard, it's going to have 24-bit audio, and what that means is it's pretty much the same type of audio that you get off of normal cameras as well. Even the camera I'm using only has 24-bit audio, and I use an external device if I need 32-bit audio. But having that ability to rescue your audio in post is crucial. Like, I think I'm peeking out in this video that I'm recording right now, and to be able to rescue it and dial it back would be pretty awesome. But I don't know until I'm editing in post. So that's what's rumored for the R6 Mark III. Now, when it came to the reasons that the R6 Mark III is coming out now, is that even though the original models were released at the same time, and Canon tends to do every 4 years, I think that the forced release of the R6 Mark II to overcome the overheating issues, and then from there having to, of course, kind of push back the release lineup of the R6 series, is what caused them to be releasing now a year after the R5 Mark II is released. And it also helps separate the people who like to buy the R5 not to make a choice, because that's the next time this camera comes out, they're not going to have another option that's cheaper. So it'll probably help them their sales. But that's what I think. Now, would I get an R6 Mark III? Probably not. I've got enough Canon cameras. The R6 I don't use that much, of course, if at all, because of the overheating issues. The R5 I still use pretty often, as well as the R5 Mark II, which I'm using now. And would I recommend it? No. I think that the one thing that would push me to recommend it, because it's got internal RAW, it's got open gate, It's got all these features. It would recommend me to push it if I had 32-bit audio internally. Then it would save me a lot. But it doesn't, so we'll see. But that's it. If you like this video, consider subscribing. And as always, you can make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys later.